Welcome into the original Gangsters Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Burnstein, and today we're going to discuss the state of the Philadelphia Mafia in 2025. Check in with the always compelling Bruno-Scarfo crime family. As everybody knows, it's been a roller coaster of a 2 years from the end of 2023 through now in going in past the first quarter of 2025. There's a little bit of instability following 20 years of a lot of stability, which followed 20 years of a lot of instability. And not when I say certain pockets of instability right now, I don't mean like it was back in the 90s or even in the 80s when people were shooting at each other. That's not the case. But for pound in 2025, the Philly Mafia, in terms of the stability meter, I wouldn't put them. I wouldn't give them an A+. Right now, they're dealing with some issues that we'll talk about. Fallout from the Skinny Joey Merlino podcasting controversy. Stevie Mazzone coming out of prison in the last couple weeks. The underboss trying to get things back in order. Anger allegedly coming from New York. Just a lot at play. A lot of moving pieces. But this is a resilient group, and I'm sure they'll make their way out of this, just like they have in the past, because this group just knows how to survive. And we've talked about it ad nauseum about how the core Merlino group are guys that have been together since they were in diapers, and even though there might be some everyone not being on the same page. The second, that doesn't mean that the union is going to collapse. This is a group of guys, again, that their oath is more to each other than to LCN in general. We've spoken about that, and there's a little bit of consternation right now, and we'll get to that. But just like any group of friends, there's ups and downs in relationships, and most people work it out and get past it. And again, I'm sure that this group will be able to do the same without any drastic measures being taken. I don't want anybody to think that I'm sitting here and predicting any type of war, but there are some lines being drawn between what I would call the Merlino camp, or the old school Merlino regime, and then underboss handsome Stevie Mazzone, who is, one of Joey Merlino's best friends. But from everything that I've been told and what I've been reporting these last couple of years, Stevie has not been cool with how things have been handled in the last, let's say 18 months or so in relation to the Merlino podcast. He's been out of prison for 2 weeks, and we're going to see how that shakes out. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about some current news and how it relates, and what it speaks to. And this past weekend, Joey Merlino had a grand opening for his new cheese steak spot in South Philly, Skinny Joey's Cheesesteaks, and it was a grand slam success, and it speaks volumes. I mean, Joey Merlino is South Philly's favorite son. You can put him up there with the Broad Street Bullies of the Philadelphia Flyer fame. You can put him up there with Will Smith, the Fresh Prince. You can put him up there with Allen Iverson, Mike Schmidt, Bryce Harper, who showed up at the grand opening this weekend. He is a true icon and also an iconoclast. Nobody's ever, they broke the mold with Joey. Nobody's ever been like that before, and nobody will be like that after Joey. Joey Merlino is one of a kind, and I really think this weekend proved that, we can sit here and debate whether he's on the shelf, who put him on the shelf. Are people in New York really mad, and how much could they actually do if they were mad about the podcast? Questions that have been debated for the last year and a half, 2 years. And the fact is, Joey's Joey. He's going to come back into town. He's going to cause a scene. He's going to have support. South Philly's never going to turn their back on him. Whether or not he has official Don status or not, he's going to be treated like a godfather, as he was this past weekend. And, I don't know, that's just kind of baked in to the Philly LCN group. You can't really extract Joey Merlino and Philly LCN. It's almost impossible to make them two separate entities. They'll always be connected. They'll always be looked at in the same, it's synonymous. Joey Merlino and the Philadelphia Mob are synonymous with each other, and it will always be. And a lot of this debate about New York and what New York supports or doesn't support, what the Philly guys have done in reaction to a lot of the other families not being thrilled about Merlino jumping on the internet in 2023. Like I said, it's, what are you going to do? And even if, Georgie Boy Borghese, the reputed boss right now, who's final, according to the reporting, Jerry Capesi, as well as myself, kind of the final decision to put Joey on the shelf was Georgie Borghese's, Joey's longtime friend. And I don't think it's really had that much of effect in terms of a negative impact on the relationship. And, well, I should say personally, business-wise, it has. Georgie was not at the grand opening. He can't really be. I don't think it would have been, based on everything we're hearing, the optics wouldn't have been great. But there were luminaries. Johnny Chang, the former underboss, alleged to be an investor in the business. He was there snapping photos along with kind of the first lady of the Philadelphia Mob, I call her 20, beautiful and in 24/7 boss mode, Kathy Chang. They were out doing the town, and again, it was a scene. It was a mob scene, to use the double entendre. Line was around the block. Great response. Everybody's saying the food was great. And, like what coming back to what I said, a minute or two ago, if you're Georgie Borghese, what are you going to do? The city loves him. I don't know if you're in New York. I know I've heard and I've reported that there's some, there's some feelings from the people in New York that, specifically the Genovese, the Gambinos, the Bonanos, that Merlino has kind of only been shelved in name only, and that he still exerts some influence, and that he's still allowed to come back to town or go into New York, and nobody really does anything. And again, that builds into the Merlino mythology. And he's right. He can go wherever he wants, and he gives zero fucks. Nothing's happened. They have a fucking hashtag that they, that whole crew with his podcast, The Skinny, him and Little Snuff and all those guys, they hashtag it. We can go anywhere, and they can. And again, what are you going to do? There's not, like I said, Joey's a force of nature, man. This guy is like, you can't slow him down. He's like a hurricane. He's like the eye of a hurricane. He sucks oxygen out of the room, and all goes to him. He's he's energy. He energizes that entire community. He's been out of South Philly on a day-to-day basis since he came home from prison in 2011. But whenever he comes in, the red carpet gets rolled out. This was no different. I'm sure this place is going to be a big success. But moving to where the crime family stands today, I think there are still some questions about how this was handled and how this is being handled. And I think only time will tell, with Stevie coming out of prison and trying to impose some of his will and try to get some of the goodwill back that has been lost from the five families in New York. And again, we've gone over this before. I don't want to, keep on beating a dead horse. I know this riles people up. The Joey fans don't like to hear that Joey upsets anybody, but it's like, what's new, man? This guy's been, rolling unfettered through, running roughshod through the underworld, through the upper world, through pop culture, through, everywhere since he came on the scene in the late 80s, early 90s. He's just been, he's been a lightning rod. And even though he's got hardcore loyalists and guys that will die for him, guys that have died for him, there are also, he has his detractors. And some of the more traditional old school guys don't love the fact that the Joey Merlino era, which began in the 90s, really foreshadowed where we are here in 2025. I mean, I've coined, he's, the Instagram Don, whether or not he's boss now or not, or, this guy was, him and his crew embraced social media. And you could, if you would have told people in 1995 that in 2015 there would be such a thing as Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and these guys would be jumping on it and jumping into the deep end of the pool, I don't think many people would be surprised. They've always been really, I've always said that I think in Philly with the Merlino guys and just the way that whole South Philly culture is, cool is a big factor. And maybe it's the only mob in the history of at least American LCN where cool matters. And these guys have always been the cool kids, even back in the, in the 70s when they were teenagers, and in the 80s when they were, kind of JV mob guys. And then when they became the leaders of the mob, that's where they were on Thursday, Friday, Saturday night was where everybody was. And it really some dynamics of that have changed, but not too many. But let's kind of break down how the family is structured right now. After we've given, we've laid the groundwork for some of the bumps in the road these last couple of years, and how, Uncle Joe Legambi, the guy that righted the ship after all those years of war in the 80s and 90s, and he came in around 99, 2000 and really stabilized things, and things were really stable for 2 decades plus. He's stepped back into a consigliere role, and he's had a lot on his plate these last couple of years. These are his guys. The Merlino, particularly. Legambi came up under Chucky Merlino and Yogi Merlino. Those were Joey's father and uncle, and that was their guy. And Joey has known Uncle Joe since he was a young man, and Uncle Joe has cleaned up a lot of Joey's messes, as has Georgie Borghese and everybody else. But they do it lovingly. They don't. There's no bitterness. And I think even with this situation of the last couple of years, with allegedly Georgie having to put Joey on the shelf, I don't think either side of it saw it as a personal thing. It was a business thing, for the best for the organization as a whole. And I've gone on record I went on record at the end of 2024. You haven't seen the end of Joey Merlino, and I expect him to be boss again at some point in the coming years. But right now, he is officially on the shelf, and the family has gone on without him. Georgie Boy Borghese is at the top of the pyramid, took over as acting Don in about 2019, and then became official boss in the fall of 2023 when Merlino voluntarily, by the way, I just want to, that was my reporting. Jerry Capesi at Gangland News, piggybacked off my reporting and broke the news of the shelving. But we were the first ones to report here at Original Gangsters and over at our companion web magazine, The Gangster Report, that Joey voluntarily stepped back to focus on his social media endeavors. He launched the Skinny podcast back in the late August of 23, and I believe he stepped down a couple weeks later in September of 23 but it was shelved based on Capesi's reporting and my follow-up reporting to Capesi, was shelved in early 24. March of 24 was put on the shelf after going on a big internet platform. Vlad TV had over 1 million views, really upset a lot of people for doing an interview like that, talking shop. And so he's been officially on the shelf for about a year. Georgie Borghese has been official boss for about 1.5 years. Underboss is still, official underboss is still Stevie Mazzone, Handsome Stevie, but he also runs a crew. Stevie had to go away for about 3 years on a racketeering beef, comes out about 10 months early. And I never think things are coincidence. And I always think the FBI and the prosecutors are intentionally stirring the pot. I'm always going to kind of lean in that direction. I never look at anything at face value. So I just think that they probably released, in my humble opinion, they let Stevie out early because they knew there were some issues with him and Georgie and Joey and New York and all this craziness, stuff erupting between Joey and his brother-in-law earlier this winter. Joey B, who was a emissary for Merlino for a long time, came over from New York, married Joey's sister, and that whole thing went public about 2 months ago or so. And I know Stevie wasn't thrilled about that. It just, everybody's dirty laundry is being aired, and it's just a bad look. I think outside of the family, it's looked at as a bad look. And Stevie had a lot of people going to him, according to my sources, going to him in prison. And, what could he do? What could he do? He was stuck there for 3 years. But I know that he was sending word out that he wasn't thrilled with the situation. And this is a guy that's been on, we've heard him on wiretaps saying that we fought a war for this. We shed blood for this. We ain't giving this up to no suckers. I mean, that was kind of a direct quote or around, I think I got it pretty close. But, he was recorded in 2015 talking to a new group of initiates and talking about how 20 years before that, him and Joey and Georgie, they fought a war and they did shed blood. And Mikey Chang and the Chang family felt a huge impact. Johnny Chang right now, that's his little brother. He died in Joey's arms in summer of '93. There were a lot of bodies that dropped in that war to give the Merlino camp control in the Philly mob that they've had now for 3 decades, over 30 years. And Stevie is protective of it and territorial for it. Like he said, this wasn't something that we just stumbled into or were given. We went to the mattress for 4 years. So I think his opinion, and I'm putting words in his mouth. I haven't heard this, but I've heard things enough to come to this conclusion that he feels that this is a fragile entity, and it needs to be treated as such, meaning control of a crime family and some of the reckless behavior which might have benefited them and created momentum for them in their younger days when they were in their 30s, might not be the best course of action now in their 60s if they're wanting to sustain, not end up back in prison, die as free men and with their families and not have to deal with the headaches from the feds. And the feds love this. They love to see infighting because they view that as avenues into making cases. And that's why Stevie wasn't supposed to come out until the holidays. And then he's kind of dropped out suddenly in early March. And it made a lot of people scratch their heads. And I just think that, the government wanted to use Stevie the government wanted to use Stevie to tickle the wire and get people talking and get people meeting and see if they can create some wind at their back to rejuvenate cases that they've been trying to make for decades. And I've been told numerous times by my sources in law enforcement that they ain't bringing no more just strict racketeering cases. Those aren't going to be brought anymore. And even the one came in that took down Stevie in 2021 or 2020. I don't remember what year it was, but it had a drug component to it. It wasn't just a racketeering case. Stevie himself didn't get nailed for any drug counts, but they're not bringing straight racketeering cases anymore unless they involve drugs and murder. And these are investigations that, again, date back decades and have had so many lives and deaths from the FBI's perspective, meaning that the cases that, sometimes it looks like cases were going to be made and they weren't, or they were, indictments, or, indictments were brought, but there wasn't as much bang for the buck as they would have liked. That 2000 racketeering case that took down the whole Merlino crew only got them on racketeering cases, or only got them on racketeering counts, didn't get them on any murder counts, and they were charging about a half dozen of them. So Borghesi's at the top. Stevie's still the underboss. Mousy served as underboss for Mousy, came back to the underboss spot for a little bit. He recently got violated, had to step away, in an acting role. Johnny Chang had been underboss. He had to retire because of health issues. But Stevie is still the official underboss and has never really given up that title. Consigliere is Joe, Uncle Joe. Got to be one of the most underrated mafia dons of the last half century. I mean, Uncle Joe was able to do something that I don't think a lot of people thought was possible, which was rein in this Merlino crew when things were getting bad. And he's a guy that went from, had a trajectory from bartender to mob boss, and a bartender to bookie to mob boss, known as one of the best handicappers in the history of South Philly and Jersey, and known as just a brilliant mind in terms of the mechanics of gambling economy in the underworld, known as a deliberate thinker, somebody that's very well connected and low key and well respected, and is a Joey whisperer and a Georgie whisperer. And it's Georgie's real uncle. Street boss Mike Lancelotti. He's been running the street in Philly for over a decade. Really the definition of stoic. You don't see the guy smile that much. I'm told by everybody that interacts with him, he doesn't talk that much. So he knows, again, he's kind of the opposite of those Merlino guys. He's a little bit older than them, didn't come from from the sandbox with them, but hooked up with them pretty early in life. And, from everyone that I speak to, Mikey Lance has a lot of juice, and everybody thinks highly of him and trusts him, both in Philly and New York. Let's talk about the skippers. I think based on my research, 2025, there are somewhere between a half dozen and 8 or 9 capos / acting capos / de facto capos. So I don't know how many, and I would say probably about 5 to 6 official skippers, and then a group of other guys that act in that capacity, a couple guys that don't have crews and report straight to the administration. So start over in Jersey, where we got Joe Scoops, Joe Licata, another very, very popular, well-connected elder statesman, guy that's been around forever, a guy that needs no introduction in LCN circles around the country. And everybody loves Joe Scoops. He runs North Jersey for the Bruno-Scarfo clan and has for a while. His acting skipper right now is Big Louis Fazzini. Has been a protege of Joe Scoops for a while, and I know Fazzini got the bump up to acting capo some point in the last 5 years, and he's the day-to-day boss in North Jersey. Also operating out of Jersey is Anthony Staino. He was referred to himself as the Philly Mafia chief financial officer back in the 2000s when Uncle Joe was first rising to power. There's some debate on whether or not he was an actual underboss or if he was just a captain, but he was very, very high up in the pecking order in the 2000s until he went away, had to go spend a chunk of time in prison, came out, kept his head down, and then in the last couple of years has come back on the scene, according to our reporting, and is doing a lot of liaisoning with New York, with the five families in New York on behalf of Borghese and on the behalf of Uncle Joe. And I'm told that he reports directly to Uncle Joe and Borghese. He does not have a group of guys underneath him. Joe Grande, an old school Scarfo era guy, I'm told is a skipper right now. He's running all of his nephew, Baby Dom Grande stuff, Teflon Dom, probably the future boss of this crime family, is only in his 40s, is doing a prison bit, his first big prison bit for drugs and racketeering, went away with Stevie. And his uncle, Joe G, is handling his affairs outside, which I think are split between South Philly and Atlantic City. And we heard Stevie in those FBI wiretaps back in 2015 talking about having to go plant the flag again in Atlantic City. They had kind of lost their grip. Atlantic City had always been one of the crown jewels in the Philly Mafia portfolio. Atlantic City in the 2010s and 20s ain't the same Atlantic City as it was in the 80s, but nonetheless, I think there are street rackets to be cultivated, and that's what Joe Grande is doing right now. And then you got some of these satellites. Sean Viteri out in Boston, the New England crew. He's what I'm told a capo of that group, which was started back in the 90s with Bobby Luisi, who has since flipped, and then he recanted, and then he was in witness protection, and then now he was out and he was podcasting. He's gone quiet a little bit, maybe in the last year or two, but that was the group that was started by Ralph Natale, Georgie Borghese, and Joey Merlino up in Boston and Providence. And Sean did a prison bit, came out, and then things were dormant there for a little bit. And then when Georgie Borghese came out of prison in about 2014, things got back up and running, and Sean has been the guy there for the Bruno-Scarfo clan. And then you got Stevie's crew. And I think there's a kind of a triumvirate of guys that handle Stevie's affairs and have handled Stevie's affairs for a while, some longer than others. I'm not sure what everybody's actual title is. Damian Canalicchio is one. Sonny Mazzone, Stevie's younger brother, is another one. And then Louis Sheep Beretta is the third. Eric Esposito, I think, is also involved in some of that stuff. I'm not sure who is the official skipper or not, but they all are Stevie's guys and help look after Stevie's action. And these are very trusted lieutenants, guys that don't just have the trust of Stevie, but have the trust of guys within the family and outside the family. I think Louis Sheep recently got a button, I'm told, but he's been one of Stevie's main guys for a while. And Eric Esposito has been made now for about, I think, 15 years, and just kind of keeps his head down and does his thing and has a lot of respect as well. So, and then just to wrap up, you have the old Scarfo era guys that aren't really part, that we've talked about over the last 10 plus years, how the Philly Mafia, numbers wise is probably as healthy as it's been in a while. And also when you add into the fact that we're being told there have been making ceremonies, being consistently held. So, I mean, I would say there's probably 50 guys minimum right now on the street that have a button, whether you're talking Scarfo era from the 80s, Merlino era, 90s and 2000s, or the Legambi Borghese era more recently. So you got a lot of different guys that are coexisting. And when you're talking about that old Scarfo group, Phil Narducci, I call him kind of a faction boss. You could call him a skipper. And then you got the Punges and Nicky Whip and those guys. I don't want to speculate on what's going on, but they kind of do their own thing. We're also, we all know that Joey Punge has been very, very successful through legitimate means since he's got out of prison, flipping houses. And, I have no idea what his role is, but he has a lot of respect. And there's a group of guys that kind of hang out, old Scarfo guys that hang out outside of Phil Narducci and the Merlino camp. But Narducci, again, he's been a guy that has never been really behind Merlino. He's a guy that Joe Legambi's very close with. Stevie Mazzone's really close with. A lot of the New York guys love Phil. He did 3 decades and showed his merit and made a lot of connections, but has never been a guy that's been a big Merlino fan. But he did. We know he did show up for Joey's mother's funeral about a year and a half ago, so paid his respects, because him and Joey are the same age. A lot of people forget that because they're from 2 different eras. But so Phil Narducci is somebody you can never overlook. He's got a lot of the 10th and O guys that kind of stand by him as well. But we don't want to make presumptions. He had his little run-in with the law a couple of years ago, had to go back to prison for an extortion case. But he does a great job with his restaurant, Chicks, and has stayed free of handcuffs since that incident. But regardless of if he's dabbling in mob affairs again, he's somebody that needs no introduction, and his reputation precedes him wherever he goes, and everybody has an immense amount of respect for him. But it is a guy that you can never, again, you can't ignore, you can't overlook him. So you got the old Scarfo guys doing whatever they're doing, and then you got the main old Merlino guys and the Borghese guys. And I know we'll see what happens this next year. I don't expect that much to change. I don't expect any violence or anything, but I think there needs to be some heart-to-hearts, some come-to-Jesus moments with how they're going to get everyone back, copacetic with each other. And I think there's some serious optics and optics play a role in this world. As much as we can sit there and say, this person doesn't give a shit and these people don't have as much juice as we think they do or what, but perception is reality. And right now, I whether you love it, I love it because I get to report on it. And it's great fodder for reporting. And this is a incredibly riveting chapter of the rise, fall, and I'm sure at one day redemption and reclaiming of his throne when it comes to Joey Merlino, because this guy, they're going to be writing books about him for decades after he's gone. He represents the modern day mafia, again, whether or not he's officially a boss, whether he's not, whether he's on the shelf, whether he's active. He's a guy that's always going to command attention, and people are always going to be fascinated by him. And however this plays out, it goes into the legacy, it goes into the mythology, and we'll see. I don't really see Joey Merlino tapping out whatever happens, I don't see him tapping out. So you're never going to break him. You're never going to bend him to your will or to any type of rules or protocols. He's broken rules his whole time, his whole career. He's broken rules and flouted authority. So I don't know what the answer is. I know that if you want to operate at full capacity, if you want to be a well-oiled machine, you got to be on good terms with other crime families in the East Coast, especially New York, if you're working out of Philadelphia. And it's been, tumultuous. And but I want to just finish by saying, like I said earlier, what are you going to do? It's like, you're not going to ban Joey from coming back to the city. You can't ban him from his own city. And you can't, the way people react, you can't curtail that. You can't curate that. It's authentic. It's organic. So I don't know what certain people in New York really expect a Borghese or a Legambi to do outside of trying to ban him, which I don't think they'll ever do, or trying to hurt him, which I don't think they'll ever do. So I'm not really certain on what the result is, what the end game is, how this all ends. But I know that Joey ain't backing down. You're not going to win a game of chicken with him. And I do know that, there's some pressure being reapplied to try to push him off the internet. And I think Stevie's going to take his shot at it as well and explain to Merlino and those guys that, maybe this has run its course and maybe we should, put an end to it and kind of start fresh and try to get everyone pulling on the same side of the rope. And I wish them all luck, because I think this is a very dicey, complex, layered situation that has a lot of personal and business things intermingled. And it's messy. And it will be messy until I think Joey Merlino's off the internet. And I don't know when that will be. So I guess, as we will bring an end to this, there's just as many questions as answers, or more questions than answers here in 2025. The organization, on one hand, has a lot of depth and is robust in terms of numbers. And there's not the kind of infighting that I think people expected 10, 15 years ago when people thought the Scarfo guys and the Merlino guys weren't going to get along. Now it's kind of every man for himself and trying to keep New York happy and trying to keep everybody in line and not continuing breaking protocol. And if you're a mafia boss or even a former mafia boss, you're not supposed to be on the internet. And it's caused issues. But again, I keep on saying, but again. So we'll see. That's our breakdown of the Philadelphia Mafia in 2025. More questions than there are answers, which is, that's the beauty of Philly. And never a dull moment. And there's a whole nother book in here that I'm hoping I'm going to write one day soon, kind of maybe with George Anastasia. I hope if George is interested, I'd love to co-write it with him and kind of be that final chapter that of the Merlino story. It will take another 10, 15 years until we can write that final chapter. But this is definitely the beginning of the final chapter as these guys get into their 60s. So please like and subscribe, share the word about the Original Gangsters Podcast. I'm going to be doing these videos breaking down the current state of the Mafia in various different cities over the next couple of weeks. We did New York a couple of weeks ago. We're doing Philly now. Next up will be Chicago. We did Montreal, and then we'll be New England, and then we'll be New Jersey, and we'll keep on moving the train forward. Again, please like, share, and subscribe. I'm Scott Burnstein, Original Gangsters Podcast, uncovering the underworld, one city, one region, one country at a time. I'm out.